My name is Iris Carter. I'm 34, and I'm the sister my family only remembers when a bill is due. At my nephew's 6th birthday party, I smiled and said, "Can't wait for the big family dinner tomorrow." My mom laughed. Actually laughed. "Wait, you don't know? That was yesterday." My sister pulled out her phone and scrolled through the proof. Photos, toasts, everyone smiling. Then she said, "Maybe take the hint next time." I didn't respond. Not so much as a blink. But here's what none of them knew. My name was on more than the guest lists they kept losing. It was on paperwork. What I did next wiped the smiles off every one of their faces, and every bit of it was legal. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet people finally stop paying for loud people's comfort. Grab your coffee and settle in. If you've ever been the one who gives the most and gets remembered the least, this story is for you. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from, and be sure to subscribe, because the ending of this one is worth staying for. Let me back up to that Saturday morning. The party was in my sister Brooke's backyard on Birchwood Lane, all dinosaur balloons and folding tables, and about 20 relatives balancing paper plates. I got there an hour early. I always get there early. I brought the cake, a green T-Rex I'd ordered from the good bakery 2 towns over, because Mason, my nephew, had been talking about that exact cake since June. I also brought the big gift, the dinosaur museum membership he'd circled in a brochure. Within 10 minutes, I was hauling extra chairs from the garage and refilling the lemonade jug, because that's my spot at family parties. Staff. Mason came flying across the grass and hugged me around the waist, and honestly, that hug was the realest thing anyone in that yard gave me all day. My brother-in-law Danny wandered over while I was setting up the dessert table. He asked, out of nowhere, "You still keep all your old mortgage paperwork, right? Closing documents, all that?" I said, "Sure, I'm a CPA. I keep everything." He nodded slow, like I'd answered a question he hadn't asked, and drifted back to the grill. I didn't think about it twice. I should have. There was something off about the whole afternoon, a current under it. Conversations that hushed when I got close. My mother steering me away from the picnic table every time the aunts got to talking, suddenly needing ice, needing napkins, needing me anywhere else. Aunt Carol, my dad's sister, watched me from a lawn chair with an expression I couldn't read then and can read perfectly now. Everybody at that party knew something I didn't. 20 people, one secret, and me carrying chairs through the middle of it with frosting on my sleeve. I should have wondered why my mother kept steering me away from the picnic table conversations. By cake time, I'd find out. It happened right after they sang to Mason. People were milling around with cake, and I was slicing seconds, and I said it loud and happy, to nobody in particular. "Can't wait for the big family dinner tomorrow." The yard went quiet in a way I felt on my skin. My mother, Sharon, tilted her head, and then she laughed. "Wait, you don't know? That was yesterday." I stood there holding the cake knife like a woman in a painting. Yesterday. Friday. While I was home ironing a dress for a dinner that had already happened. Brooke didn't even hesitate. She pulled out her phone and turned the screen toward me and scrolled. Slow, like she was showing off vacation pictures. There it was. The long table at Antonelli's. Candles. My mother mid-toast with her glass up. Danny laughing. Cousin Rachel with a forkful of pasta. Aunt Carol at the far end, the only face not smiling. Everyone I loved, dressed up and glowing, at a family dinner I had asked about twice that week and been told, both times, "We're still figuring out the date, sweetheart." Brooke clicked her phone dark and looked at me, and her voice came out flat and bored. "Maybe take the hint next time." 20 people heard it. A couple of the cousins suddenly got very interested in their cake. Nobody said a word in my defense. And my mother reached for another slice like the weather had come up. I didn't respond. I want you to understand that, because it matters later. No tears, no demands, no scene for them to replay in the group chat I apparently wasn't in. I knelt down, hugged Mason, told him happy birthday, and that his cake was the best one I'd ever ordered. I left his gift on the table. Then I picked up my purse and walked to my car through the quietest backyard in Ohio. In the rearview mirror, I could see my mother laughing at something, already moved on, like I'd been a commercial break. I drove the 15 minutes back to my condo with the radio off. If you've ever been publicly erased by people who share your last name, you know that silence. It has a texture. I let myself in, set my keys in the dish by the door, and stood in my little kitchen while the kettle worked itself up to a whistle. I'm a CPA. When I hurt, I don't scream. I reconcile. So I sat at my counter with a cup of tea I never drank and started lining things up in my head, the way I'd line up a client's messy year. Fact: the dinner was planned. Candles and a reserved table don't happen by accident. Fact: I had asked about it twice, and twice been told there was no date yet. Fact: not one of the 20 people in those photos had thought to text me, which meant it wasn't an oversight. Oversights leak. Secrets hold. My eyes drifted, the way they always do when the apartment gets too quiet, to the top of my hall closet, where my father's old fireproof box has sat since his funeral 5 years ago. Black, dented on one corner, heavy as a headstone. The funeral home gave it to me, said Dad had labeled it for me specifically. I'd carried it home, put it up there, and never opened it. Some days I told myself I was too busy. Most days I knew I just wasn't ready to hear from him yet. I looked at that box for a long minute, then looked away. Not tonight. Tonight I had a different account to review. My phone lit up on the counter, and for one stupid second I thought someone was checking on me. It was a notification that Brooke had posted the birthday photos. I scrolled once and stopped. That's when I finally noticed what had been missing for months: the family group chat. Gone from my phone. I hadn't left it. I'd been removed. To explain what I did next, I have to take you back 5 years, to the week we buried my father. Frank Carter was a diesel mechanic with forearms like bridge cable and a laugh you could hear across a parking lot. He handled everything: the bills, the taxes, the insurance, the gutters. When his heart gave out on a Tuesday, my mother didn't just lose a husband. She lost the person who stood between her and every envelope with a window in it. I found her 3 weeks after the funeral at the kitchen table, crying over a stack of mail she hadn't opened. She kept saying, "I don't know what any of this is." I was 29, 2 years into my license, finally steady on my feet. So I did what I'd been doing since I was 19, when Dad first got sick and I was the only one in the family who could read a hospital bill without fainting. I took the stack home. I set up autopay for her property taxes and her homeowner's insurance, close to $4,000 a year, out of my account. I put her phone on my plan. When her roof needed patching that fall, the check was mine. I never announced it. I never sent her a statement. Support shouldn't need a receipt. That was my thinking. And I'm telling you now, that was my first accounting error. Because here's what happens when you help quietly: the story gets written without you. At church, in the family, my mother became the widow who was managing so beautifully on her own, strong Sharon, and she never once corrected the record. My sister watched all of it. Brooke was 26 then, and she learned the family math faster than I did. Whatever falls, Iris catches it, and nobody has to say thank you because nobody officially saw it happen. That lesson was about to get expensive. 7 years ago, Brooke married Danny, and about 8 months into the marriage, she showed up at my condo in tears about their rent going up again. My mother came with her, which should tell you the visit was choreographed. "You're doing so well, Iris. Help your sister get a real start. It's what your father would want." I'll be honest, I wanted to help. Mason had just been born, and the thought of him having a backyard did something to my chest. But I'm a CPA, so my help came with paperwork. I put in $42,000 for the down payment on the house on Birchwood Lane. I co-signed the loan because on her boutique hours and Danny's commissions, the bank wouldn't touch them without me. And I set one condition: my name went on the deed as a co-owner. Brooke's face pinched when I said it, and Danny made a joke about not trusting family, and I told them what I'll tell you. Paper doesn't get feelings. Paper just remembers. The verbal deal was simple. They'd handle the mortgage, and over time they'd buy me out, a little every year, until the house was all theirs. That was the plan, in the living room, with my mother nodding along as a witness. In 6 years, I have received exactly 0 of those payments. Not a partial one. Not an apologetic one. What I received instead, starting about 3 years ago, was a monthly phone call. "We're a little short, sis." And $700 a month went out of my account and into their mortgage, month after month, for 3 years running. Meanwhile, at every barbecue, my sister gave tours of her granite countertops. Everyone in the family knew Brooke owned a lovely house. Nobody asked how, and the one person who could have told them sat quietly at the end of the table, passing the potato salad, holding up the whole arrangement. I wish I could tell you the birthday party was the first time. It was just the first time they said it out loud. 2 Thanksgivings ago, the family moved dinner up from 4 o'clock to 1, and somehow the update never reached me. I walked in with 2 pies while they were clearing plates. My mother patted my arm and said they'd assumed I was working. Last Mother's Day, I found out about the fancy brunch from a framed photo on her hallway table. All of them in florals at the garden room, taken at a brunch I'd have gladly paid for, which, come to think of it, might have been the one job they didn't need me for. Then the group chat quietly died and got reborn without me. Every time I asked about any of it, my mother had the same answer, delivered with a little squeeze of my hand. "You're the strong one, sweetheart. You don't need a seat. You're the one holding up the table." For years I filed that under love. Twice I did push back. But about the money, because that's the language I speak. Twice I sat them down and suggested we put the arrangement in writing. A simple family repayment plan. Nothing scary. The first time, Brooke cried so hard she had to leave the room, and the story became that I'd made my sister sob over a spreadsheet. The second time was the week of Dad's first anniversary, and my mother's blood pressure spiked that same night. And from her recliner she whispered that she couldn't take the stress of her girls fighting, so I dropped it. Both times, I dropped it. But I never took my name off that deed, and I never stopped saving receipts, because accountants are good with numbers even when we're terrible with hints. I told myself it was all forgetfulness. Forgetfulness doesn't organize a dinner for 20 and hide it. Sunday morning, 9 o'clock, my phone rang. Mom. I stood over it for 3 rings, then answered. Because 34 years of training doesn't die overnight. She didn't mention the party. She didn't mention the dinner. Her voice was sugar and small talk, the TV murmuring behind her, and then she got to the point the way she always does, sideways. "Mason's swim lessons are due this week, honey, and Brooke's car is making that noise again. Could you take care of it like always? Money's so tight for them right now." Like always. I looked out my window at the parking lot and heard her sip her coffee. Comfortable, certain, a woman placing a routine order at a drive-thru that had never once been out of stock. Something in me sat down and folded its hands. "I'll think about it," I said. The line went so quiet I checked the screen to see if the call had dropped. In my entire adult life, I had never said those words to my mother. She recovered fast, laughed a little, said, "Don't be silly, it's for Mason," which was the point, and we both knew it. Mason was the handle on the drawer where the money lived. I repeated it, gentler than she deserved. "I'll think about it, Mom." After we hung, I sat at my kitchen counter for a long time. Here's the thing about people like me. We don't snap. We finish our coffee, we rinse the cup, and then we get extremely organized. That afternoon, I did something I do for strangers every single day of my working life and had never once done for my own family. I opened a spreadsheet. And before I typed a single number, I made a decision so calm it scared me a little. Whatever the total at the bottom of that sheet turned out to be, this family was about to become my most well-documented client. It took me 2 evenings to pull 5 years of bank statements and 1 long Sunday to face them. I went line by line with a highlighter, the same way I'd work a client's messy books. Yellow for Mom, property taxes, homeowner's insurance, her phone line, the roof patch, the new water heater 2 winters ago. Green for Brooke and Danny, $700 a month to the mortgage, 36 months and counting, plus swim lessons, plus summer camp, plus the emergency flight to Florida that turned out to be a cruise. Pink for the things I'd forgotten I paid for, which was its own quiet heartbreak, because there was a lot of pink. When the sheet finally totaled at the bottom, I sat back and stared at it. Close to $53,000. 5 years of quiet support, not counting the $42,000 I'd put down on Birchwood, which wasn't a gift, wasn't support, was an investment with my name on a deed, a distinction my family was hoping I'd forgotten. $53,000, and I couldn't get a text about a dinner. I printed the whole thing, clipped it into a binder with color tabs and laughed once, alone in my kitchen, at what I was holding. Brooke told me to take the hint. Well, here it was. I was finally taking the hint. All of it. Itemized. In 12-point font. Then I stopped laughing, because a payment reminder had popped up on my screen while I worked. Mom's insurance autopay, due to renew at the end of the month, the way it had renewed every year for 5 years, automatic as sunrise, invisible as air. I looked at that reminder for a long moment, and I circled one line on the printout. Every arrangement I had with this family had one thing in common. I was the only person in it, and any account with one signer, that signer can close. Tuesday night, my cousin Rachel called. Rachel is 28, sweet as pie, and constitutionally incapable of holding a secret with both hands. She started with a wobbly apology about the party, how awful it was, how she'd felt sick watching me walk to my car. Then, trying to make it better, she made it much worse. For what it's worth, I thought you knew about Antonelli's and just couldn't come. It was planned forever ago, like 3 weeks. Aunt Sharon put it in the chat and everything. I kept my voice level. Which chat, Rach? A pause I could have parked a truck in. The family one. Family only, it's called. I figured you muted it. I let her hear me not answering. 3 weeks. A reserved table for 20 takes planning, I knew that already. But hearing it confirmed, the name of the chat, the calendar invite, my mother as the organizer, settled something cold in my stomach. This wasn't an oversight, it was logistics. And there was more. I could hear it in the way Rachel kept breathing like she was about to speak. The thing is, she finally said, Aunt Sharon told everybody not to mention it to you. She said it was a surprise thing. I honestly thought you were the surprise, Iris, like they were going to bring you in at dessert. I'm so sorry. I feel horrible. A surprise thing. My mother had wrapped my exclusion in party paper and handed it to 20 people, and every one of them had carried it right past me at a 6-year-old's birthday. Before we hung up, Rachel's voice dropped low, the way it does when she's saying the thing she came to say. There was a toast, near the end, about the house. Brooke's house. I didn't really get it, but it felt weird. You should ask your sister. Then she was gone, and I was standing in my kitchen, wide awake. I decided to give my mother one honest chance. Wednesday after work, I drove to her house, the house whose taxes I pay, and sat at her kitchen table with the ceramic rooster napkin holder I've known my whole life. I asked her plainly, Mom, why wasn't I told about the dinner? I watched her go through her repertoire like a musician warming up. First the flutter of confusion, then the wounded eyes. Then, right on schedule, the tears. Not sobbing, never sobbing, just a delicate shimmer, the kind that photographs well. You're always working, honey. We didn't want to bother you. I pointed out that I'd asked about the dinner twice. The tears paused, recalibrated. Well, sweetheart, if you're honest with yourself, you can be a lot. About money. You make people feel small about money. There it was, the flip. In under 2 minutes, a dinner planned behind my back had become a mercy they'd extended to protect everyone from me. I sat with my hands folded and did what I do in tense client meetings. I observed. Her tears balanced perfectly, I remember thinking. Debit. Guilt. Credit. Mine. When she saw the flip wasn't landing, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand, and out came the oldest tool in her drawer. You're the strong one, sweetheart. You know that. You've never needed all the fuss. No apology, not even the outline of one. I said okay, kissed her cheek, and carried my mug to the sink, because you can be done with somebody and still rinse your cup. And that's when I saw it, sitting on the counter by the phone charger, bright as a warning light. A glossy bank brochure, the kind they hand out at the branch on Main Street. Home refinancing, it said. Unlock your home's equity. My mother has owned her house outright since before Dad died. I stood there with my hands dripping, and I didn't understand yet. But I was starting to. Aunt Carol called me Thursday and kept it so short it told me everything about which side of the family she came from. Coffee, tomorrow. Just us two. We met at the diner out by the county line, and my father's sister slid into the booth, ordered black coffee, and skipped the small talk. You want to know what the toast was? I said yes. She stirred her coffee once, set the spoon down like a gavel. Near the end of dinner, Danny stood up with his glass and said, and I quote, "By Christmas, this house will be 100% done." And the whole table clapped. I sat very still. Carol kept going, quiet and furious. Then your mother patted his arm and said not to worry, she'd handle the conversation with you, that you'd sign whatever the family needed because... Carol's jaw worked. Because family doesn't charge family. The pieces slid together with an almost mechanical click. Danny at the dessert table asking if I still kept my closing paperwork. The refinance brochure glowing on my mother's counter. A dinner for 20 with one name scrubbed off the list. They hadn't forgotten me. They had excluded me on purpose, because the evening's entertainment was a plan to talk me out of my half of a house, and my presence would have ruined the show. You can't workshop how to handle Iris with Iris passing the breadsticks. I asked Carol why she hadn't told me sooner, and she looked at her hands. I kept hoping I'd misheard. Then I watched that child tell you to take the hint and your mother laughed and I stopped hoping. She paid for both coffees, waving my card away like an insult. In the parking lot, she caught my arm. That's not even the part that made me leave early, she said. There's something else, and I need you to hear it sitting down. Before I tell you what my aunt said next, let me ask you something. Have you ever discovered you were the only one not in the room, and the room was full of people you'd been quietly carrying? If that's ever been you, drop a comment below, because I read everyone. And subscribe, because what I found in my father's fireproof box a few nights later changed absolutely everything. We got back in the booth. Carol wrapped both hands around her cup and told me about the moment, somewhere between the entrees and that toast, when she'd looked down the table and asked, loud enough to carry, "Where's Iris?" The table went awkward, she said. My mother waved her fork like she was shooing a fly. Iris is fine, she's busy. You know how she is. And Brooke, my sister, added the line Carol said she'd been hearing in her head all week. She'd just make it about money anyway. Carol looked at me across the diner table. Iris, honey, they planned a dinner about money, to talk about taking your money, and the reason you weren't invited is that you'd make it about money. She laughed, one dry note with no joy in it. Your father would have flipped that table into the parking lot. Hearing his name out loud did something to my throat. Carol saw it and softened. She told me things I'd half known, how Dad used to worry about me, how he'd told her once that Sharon and Brooke treated my paycheck like a utility, something that hums in the wall and never needs thanking. Then she leaned in. Frank left you that box for a reason, sweetheart, the black one from the funeral home. Have you opened it? I admitted it was still on the closet shelf, 5 years of dust on the lid. Carol nodded like she'd expected that. He made me promise not to nag you about it. Consider this me breaking a promise. She squeezed my hand, a real squeeze, nothing like my mother's, and said, "Open the box, Iris." I drove home in the dark, and I didn't even take my coat off. I went straight to the hall closet, pulled down the kitchen step stool, and reached up into 5 years of not being ready. The box was heavier than I remembered. I set it on the kitchen counter, wiped the dust off with a dish towel, and worked the little key from the envelope the funeral home had taped underneath. Inside, my father had left me 3 things, stacked as neatly as he used to stack his socket wrenches, The first was a folder labeled Birchwood in his blocky mechanic's handwriting. Inside was the complete closing file from Brooke's house, the file he'd asked to keep safe for me when we signed, and I'd let him, because it gave him a job he could still do. His heart gave out about a year later. Settlement statement, loan documents, and on top, the recorded deed, with the owners' names typed clean and unambiguous. Brooke E. Dunn, Daniel R. Dunn, and Iris M. Carter, joint owners. My name, third but equal, in black ink, that had outlived him. The second thing was an old passbook from the credit union, closed out and kept. A savings account he'd nursed for years and signed over to me the spring we bought Birchwood, labeled with a sticky note, "For Iris's house someday." I recognized the balance. Most of it had gone into my sister's down payment, and he had known that, and he had kept the passbook anyway. The third thing was an envelope, soft at the corners from being handled, with one line on the front. "For Iris. Open when they forget you. Not if. When." I stood at my counter and read my father's letter, and I'm not going to give you all of it, because some of it is just mine. But I'll give you the part that matters. He wrote that he'd watched how they treated me for years and hadn't been strong enough to fight both of them and his own heart at the same time, and that he was sorry. And then, underlined twice, pressed so hard the pen had nearly torn through, "Don't let them make a bank out of you, kiddo. A bank is a building people only visit to take something out." My father had been gone 5 years. That night, he was the only member of my family who showed up for me. I slept 8 hours for the first time in 2 weeks, and in the morning I called Meg Sullivan. Meg and I have known each other since high school civics. Now she's a real estate attorney with a corner office above the pharmacy and a handshake like a stapler. I laid it all out on her conference table. The deed, the loan, my $53,000 binder, the toast, the brochure. Meg read in silence, flipping pages with one finger, and then gave it to me straight. 1. The autopays were voluntary gifts, and gifts can stop. Full stop. A 60-day written notice wasn't legally required, just decent, and decent was fine by me. 2. My name on that deed meant nobody. Not Brooke, not Danny, not a loan officer, not my mother with a casserole. Could remove me without my signature. That's the entire point of a deed. 3. The house itself had a clean, boring, legal path. First, an independent appraisal. Then a written buyout offer. They purchase my share at fair value, or I purchase theirs. And if they refuse to do either? Then you file what's called a partition action, Meg said. Any co-owner has that right. A judge won't let one owner squat on the other's share forever. If nobody buys anybody out, the court can order the house sold and the money split. She capped her pen. You don't need revenge, Iris. You need paperwork. I told her that in my experience those were the same thing, done right, and Meg smiled the way lawyers smile when they realize the client is going to be fine. Before I left, I set 3 rules for myself, out loud, so they'd count. No lying, ever. My family's weapon, not mine. No arguing in group chats. And everything, every single thing, in writing. That afternoon, at my kitchen table, with my father's letter propped against the fruit bowl, I signed the first letter. 2 envelopes went out that Thursday, certified mail, return receipt requested. The first was addressed to my mother. It informed her, in polite and complete sentences, that the automatic payments for her property taxes, homeowners insurance, and phone line would end in 60 days, and that the attached schedule showed everything paid on her behalf over the past 5 years, provided for her records. No accusations, no adjectives, just dates and amounts. 5 years of invisible love made suddenly, unbearably, visible. The second envelope was addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Daniel Dunn. It noted that the monthly transfers to their mortgage, the ones Brooke had assured the family didn't exist, would stop immediately. It further advised on Meg's letterhead that as co-owner of the Birchwood Lane property I had scheduled an independent appraisal, and that upon receipt of the appraised value they would have 30 days to respond to a formal buyout offer for my interest in the home. The word partition appeared exactly once, in the final paragraph, quiet as a padlock clicking shut. I walked both envelopes to the post office myself. It was raining, that fine gray Ohio drizzle that can't commit. And I stood in line between a man mailing a birdhouse and a teenager with a college application, holding the two most honest letters my family had ever received from me. The clerk stamped them, slid my receipts across the counter, and said, "Anything else, hun?" And I said, "No. That ought to do it." Certified mail. Return receipt requested. The Carter family was about to learn that I speak fluent paperwork. I treated myself to a coffee on the walk home and felt, for the first time in years, like a woman whose accounts were finally being brought current. The letters landed on a Saturday. My phone started ringing Monday morning at 7:02. Here's a small miracle for you. It turns out I could be added back to family only, after all, and it took less than 48 hours once money was involved. Monday morning, I woke to 11 missed calls from my mother and a notification that Danny had added me to the group chat. Not to apologize, you understand. To hold the trial. The messages were already stacked up like cordwood when I opened it. Danny. So, this is what kind of person you really are. Selfish. Danny again. After everything this family has done for you. I read that one twice, honestly curious about what it might refer to. Brooke posted a photo of Mason at the swim lessons I paid for, captioned, "Hope your money keeps you warm." Then, because she can never resist, she added, "You finally took a hint, huh? The wrong one." An aunt I hadn't heard from since Easter chimed in with a praying hands emoji and something about family being everything. I sat on the edge of my bed in my work blouse, watching my character get assassinated in real time by people whose bills were in my binder, and I felt the old reflex rise. Explain, soothe, fix. I let it pass through me like a cramp. Then I typed my one and only contribution to that thread, the single message I would post there all winter. Everything I have to say is in the letters. I muted the chat, not left it, muted it, let them wonder, and drove to work, where numbers behave, and nobody cries at you. Rachel texted me privately around noon. A heart then. For the record, I think the letters were classy. That evening, at 8:03, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole I saw my mother on my welcome mat, holding a casserole dish with 2 oven mitts, wearing her church face. I don't argue in group chats. I answer in writing. But you have to open the door for your mother. So I did. She came in like a weather system, set the casserole on my stove, and for about 30 seconds, my mother was a real person in my kitchen. She looked smaller than usual. She touched the edge of my counter and said, without any performance in it at all, "I haven't opened a bill since your father died. Did you know that?" I see the envelopes and my chest goes tight. The numbers look like his handwriting. And I'll tell you the truth. I nearly folded. My whole life I have wanted 30 seconds of her being real. I almost reached for her hand. Then she reached for her purse. From it, she drew a document, unfolded it, and smoothed it flat on my counter next to the casserole like a place setting. I recognized the format before I read a word, because I'd seen the blank version at Meg's office. A quitclaim deed. Prepared, printed, filled in. My name typed as the party releasing all interest in the Birchwood Lane property to Brooke E. Dunn and Daniel R. Dunn. Someone had even flagged the signature line with a little pink sticky arrow. "If you love this family," my mother said, her voice back in costume now, "you'll sign this, and everything can go back to normal." I looked at the form. I looked at her. And I heard myself say, calm as a bank teller at closing time, "Normal was me paying to be forgotten. I've closed that account." The tears came then, of course, on cue, and when they didn't move me, she went through anger, and from anger to the last door in the hallway. "Your father would be ashamed of you." I walked to my hall closet and rested my hand on the fireproof box, just for a second, like touching a railing. If she only knew, I thought, what was resting 8 inches from her casserole. She left near 9, the form stayed on my counter, unsigned, and across town, though I wouldn't learn it for days, her son-in-law was already on the phone with a bank. The appraisal became a siege. The appraiser, a patient man named Mr. Whitfield, scheduled a Tuesday walkthrough. Monday night, Brooke canceled it, citing a sick child, though Mason's school photos from that same Tuesday looked remarkably healthy on her feed. Second appointment, nobody answered the door. Whitfield stood on the porch of a house I co-own, knocking politely, while somewhere inside my sister waited him out behind the curtains I'd helped pay for. That evening Danny texted me directly, all caps generously included. "Send your guy near my house again and see what happens." I forwarded it to Meg without commentary, the way you'd hand a doctor an interesting x-ray. Meg responded with a letter that translated from lawyer into English, roughly as follows: obstructing the appraisal delays nothing, changes nothing, and reads terribly in front of a judge. The walkthrough will occur, cooperatively or by court order, and the meter on my patients was now running on their dime. The third appointment, the door opened. Brooke stood there in full hostess mode for Whitfield, offering him coffee, laughing her boutique laugh, as if the previous 2 weeks had been weather. The report came back in 9 days. The house on Birchwood Lane appraised at $310,000, with about $182,000 still owed on the loan I'd co-signed. Meg drafted the buyout offer that same afternoon, clean and generous. They could purchase my interest at the appraised value's terms, financing permitting, within 30 days, or entertain my offer to purchase theirs. I signed it with the same pen I use for tax season. 30 days, I told Meg. In writing. No drama. I do spreadsheets. Meg slid the letter into the envelope and said, "For what it's worth, most families settle at this point." I told her most families would have mailed a thank you card 5 years ago. We sent it certified. And my sister, upon receiving a fair market offer delivered by a professional, responded with the one weapon she's truly fluent in, her mouth. The story hit the family grapevine by the weekend, and by the following Wednesday it had reached my mother's church circle, gathering flourishes at every stop like a snowball rolling downhill. In Brooke's version, I was evicting a 6-year-old at Christmas time, throwing my own nephew into the snow. One of Mom's friends from the Altar Guild actually called me. I still don't know who gave her my number. And opened with, "Iris, honey, how could you? That sweet little boy." I thanked her for her concern and wished her a blessed afternoon, and hung up while she was still inhaling. Because here's what I had decided, and I want to say it plainly for every woman listening who has ever been talked about by people she carried. I did not defend myself. Not once. No correcting posts, no reply all essays, no receipts posted to the group chat. Though heaven knows I had the binder for it. Silence is underrated. It has excellent interest rates. I went to work. I went to yoga. I had Friday dinners with Meg and Sunday coffee with Aunt Carol, and I let my sister exhaust herself narrating a villain I declined to play. Meanwhile, my mother worked the church angle, appearing at coffee hour with the brave, damp look of a woman enduring an ungrateful child, accepting sympathy the way she'd accepted my autopays, as a standing order. But small towns have long memories and sharp arithmetic, and the snowball hit a wall it didn't see coming. After service one Sunday, right at the coffee urn, old Mrs. Pruitt from the Altar Guild asked my mother a question in her church voice, which carries. "But Sharon, dear, if Iris owns half the house and the children can't pay for it, who's been paying all this time?" My mother, I'm told, developed a sudden fascination with the creamer. She never answered. She didn't have to. Somebody else was about to answer for her. It happened at Rachel's housewarming, a party I skipped on purpose. By then I'd learned how much better my family behaves in rooms I'm not in, and how much I'd been paying for the privilege of being talked over in rooms I was. Aunt Carol, however, attended, and Aunt Carol had reached the end of her rope somewhere around the phrase, evicting a 6-year-old. As Rachel told it to me later, breathless, half the family was in the kitchen when Brooke started the Pour Us tour again. Tight money, cruel sister, Christmas looming. And Carol set down her plate with a click that stopped the room. "Tell them who made your down payment, Brooke." Silence. $42,000. "Tell them whose name has been on your deed since the day you got the keys." Tell them who's been quietly covering your mortgage every month for years, while you stood in this family's backyards calling it your house. Brooke went the color of oatmeal. And Carol wasn't finished. She turned to my mother, who was studying her punch. And you? 5 years of property taxes. Insurance. The phone in your purse right now. Tell them who pays for it, Sharon. Or I will. My mother said, Carol, this is not the place. Which, as confessions go, was a complete one. Rachel said you could watch the room recalculate. Aunts doing 5 years of math behind their eyes, uncles suddenly finding their shoes fascinating, the whole family ledger getting restated in real time. The same relatives who'd texted me praying hands went very, very quiet. Rachel's message to me that night was short, and it has never once failed to make me smile. Nobody's smiling anymore, cousin. That was the moment my family stopped calling me selfish. Based on what came next, I believe they upgraded me to dangerous. Because within days, the phone rang. And it wasn't family. It was a stranger, asking a question that turned my stomach to ice. Quick pause, because this next part is where everything detonates. If you've made it this far, you already know this story was never really about a missed dinner. It's about a family discovering that the quiet one kept receipts. If you believe helping family should never mean erasing yourself, tap that subscribe button and drop a comment that says, I kept the receipts. Now, the phone call. And then, the family meeting. The caller introduced herself as a processor from a mortgage broker's office 2 towns over, apologized for the bother, and said she was calling to confirm my availability for a signing appointment. I said I wasn't aware of any signing appointment. She laughed, friendly, assuming a mix-up. For the Birchwood Lane refinance, we have the quitclaim and the new loan application in process. The family indicated you'd agreed in principle. We just need your signature to release your interest before the new loan can close. I asked her, very evenly, when the file had been opened. Papers shuffled. And then she read me a date I will remember for the rest of my life, because it was 11 days before Mason's birthday party. 11 days before, take the hint. They had opened a refinance file, a file whose entire existence depended on me giving away my half of that house. Before the dinner, before the toast, before my mother laughed at me over birthday cake. The dinner wasn't a snub that got out of hand. It was a step in a process. Get the family aligned over pasta, soften the ground, send mom in with a casserole and a sticky arrow, and walk me into a title office like a mare into a trailer. The processor was still talking, cheerful, oblivious. I closed my eyes and kept my voice level, and I gave her the only quote I had for the file. Please note this clearly. I have agreed to nothing. No signing will be scheduled. Anything further can go through my attorney. I spelled Meg's name slowly, thanked her for her diligence, and hung up. Then I called Meg, who used a word I won't repeat, and turned the buyout deadline from a suggestion into a countdown. That evening, my mother posted to Family Only in full matriarch voice, Family meeting, Sunday 2 o'clock. My house. Everyone. We are going to end this nonsense as a family. I said I'd be there. It was the first family invitation I'd received in a year, and I noted, with professional appreciation, that all it took was a certified letter. Saturday night, I packed a navy 3-ring binder the way other women pack for surgery. Tab 1. A copy of the recorded deed, my name highlighted. Tab 2. The 5-year support schedule, every autopay, every, we're short sis, subtotaled by household. Tab 3. Whitfield's appraisal. Tab 4. The buyout offer, with its 30-day deadline, now 8 days from expiring. And Tab 5, the one Meg had couriered over that afternoon, a complete, signed, ready-to-file partition petition. Every blank filled, every exhibit attached, wanting nothing but a courthouse and a Monday. Meg had offered to come. I turned her down. With love. They ambushed me with a birthday cake, I told her. I'll return the favor with a 3-ring binder. The last thing I packed wasn't for them. I took my father's letter out of the fireproof box and slid it into the binder's inside pocket, where I could feel it through the fabric. I didn't plan to show it to anyone, ever. It wasn't evidence. It was a handrail. Sunday afternoon, I ironed the gray blazer I wear for audit meetings, drove the 15 minutes to my mother's house, and rolled slowly up her street. 11 cars in and around the driveway. Danny's truck up front, angled across the walk like a checkpoint. Through the front window, I could see the shapes of my family arranging themselves, and my mother's silhouette in her wing chair, and folding chairs. The same folding chairs I'd hauled across Brooke's backyard 6 weeks earlier. I sat in my car for 1 minute, hand on the binder, and thought about how they believed I was walking into a trial. So did I. We were all correct. We just disagreed about who was on trial. My mother's living room had been staged like a hearing. Relatives packed the sofa and the folding chairs in a horseshoe. My mother held the wing chair in the center, a box of tissues stationed on the armrest, pre-positioned, like a fire extinguisher. Brooke perched on the arm of the love seat. Danny stood. Of course Danny stood, planted on the hearth with his arms crossed, running the room. Mason, I noted with relief, had been sent to the neighbors. Aunt Carol and Rachel sat near the door and gave me the only 2 nods I got when I came in, and took the folding chair left for me in the middle, the defendant's seat, my binder flat on my lap. Danny opened proceedings. Here's how this ends, Iris. You sign the quitclaim, you drop the lawyer, and after some time, if you act right, this family will let you back in. Let me back in. My mother dabbed at dry eyes and delivered her line to the jury. Look at what you're doing to us, sweetheart. Your father would be heartbroken. Sign it and be my daughter again. Then Brooke, arms folded, chin up. She's been planning this for years. Why do you think she put her name on my deed? She was waiting to pounce. One of the uncles grunted along. A cousin studied the carpet. The horseshoe waited for me to defend myself, because that's the role I'd always played here. Explainer, apologizer, restorer of other people's comfort. I looked around the room at every face I'd covered, ferried, funded, and forgiven, and I did the one thing this family has never known how to survive. I sat there, calm, and said nothing at all. The silence stretched. It got heavy. People shifted in the folding chairs, and the more nothing I said, the louder they got. And the louder they got, the worse they sounded in front of their own witnesses. Danny finally slapped the mantel with his palm. Say something. So I unzipped my binder. I spoke the way I speak in audit meetings, low and unhurried, which meant the whole room had to lean in to hear me, and there is real power in making people lean. You've all heard a lot about me lately, I said. Let's check the math. I took out tab 1 and laid the deed on my mother's coffee table, turned so the room could read it. This is the recorded deed to the house on Birchwood Lane. 3 owners, Brooke, Danny, me. It's been that way since the day they got the keys. I looked at my sister gently. That's not a plan, Brooke. That's a closing document. Your husband signed it in front of a notary. Somebody's chair creaked. I laid down tab 2. This is every payment I've made for this family for 5 years. Mom's property taxes, mom's insurance, mom's phone, the roof, the water heater. I turned the page. And this column is $700 a month for 3 years into Brooke and Danny's mortgage. The mortgage this family has been told at every cookout that they pay themselves. I set the pages on the table and let them go where they wanted, and they went, hand to hand around that horseshoe, aunts tilting their reading glasses, an uncle whistling low before he could stop himself. My mother's sister looked up from the schedule, looked at my mother, and didn't look away. The room got quieter with every page turn, that specific silence of 20 people resorting a decade of assumptions. Brooke's voice came out too high. You can't just... And stopped, because the numbers were sitting on the table and numbers don't raise their voice. My mother tried to gather the room back. She switched from the tissues to scripture cadence, the voice she uses for grace at Thanksgiving. Iris, we are your family. Family doesn't invoice family. I nodded, because on this one point my mother and I have always agreed. You're right, Mom. Family doesn't. I laid tab 4, the buyout offer, next to the deed. But you stopped treating me like family a long time ago. You held a dinner to plan how to unfamily me from a house I paid for. You made me a bank. I heard Carol exhale across the room. And banks, I said, Send notices. Danny came off the hearth like a man stepping onto a stage. You can't force us to do anything. I took out the last tab and set it beside the others, squared to the table edge, because neatness is its own kind of thunder. This is a partition petition, signed, complete. My attorney files it Monday morning if the offer on this table expires. I kept my voice at kitchen volume. Any co-owner of a property has the right to ask the court to divide it. A judge won't split a house with feelings. He'll split it with a sale. Buy me out at the appraised value by Friday, or make me an offer for your share, or the house gets sold and we each take our part. Those are all three options. There is no fourth. The room detonated on schedule. Danny came forward shouting. About family, about loyalty, about lawyers, about what kind of woman does this. And I watched the uncles who'd grunted along with him an hour ago stare into their coffee, declining to board the sinking ship. He called me names my mother didn't even flinch at, which told the room plenty about dinner conversation on Birchwood Lane. I didn't stand. I didn't raise my voice. I've found that when you're holding the paperwork, volume is a tax paid only by people who aren't. Then Brooke broke. She shot up off the loveseat arm with her fists balled, and what came out of her wasn't an argument. It was the truth finally, at full volume, in front of everyone. Fine. You want to know why you weren't invited? Because you ask questions, Iris. You always ask questions. We just needed one dinner without you doing this. She flung a hand at the table. At the deed, the schedule, the offer. At the visible shape of everything they'd built on my silence. The horseshoe went still. Even Danny stopped. My sister had just explained to 20 witnesses, more clearly than my binder ever could, that I hadn't been forgotten. I'd been managed. My mother reached for the last tool in the drawer, the tears arriving right on time. Iris, sweetheart, you're the strong one. I stood up then, and I said it quietly. Which is why everyone heard it. You always said I was the one holding up the table, Mom. Watch what happens when I let go. I zipped the empty binder. The papers stayed. You told me to take the hint, Brooke. I did. All of them. Around that living room, on every single face, the smiles were gone. Everyone. I picked up my purse and walked toward the door, past the folding chairs, past the horseshoe of people recalculating me, and nobody said a word until Aunt Carol stood up out of her chair like a verdict. She looked around that room slowly, giving every face time to be seen looking away, and she said, Frank would be proud of exactly one person in this room. Nobody asked her which one. Rachel caught my sleeve at the door, eyes swimming, and whispered, I'm sorry, Iris. I nodded at the two of them. Only the two of them, because a boundary means knowing exactly who is inside it. At the door I turned around, one hand on the knob, and gave my family my closing statement, short enough to fit on a receipt. The offer stands until Friday. After that, the court decides. Either way, I'm done paying to be loved. Then I walked out of my mother's house, past 11 cars into a cold, bright October afternoon. The air tasted like a window that had finally been opened. I got in my car and sat for a second, feeling my father's letter through the binder pocket, and I thought about the last line, the one underlined twice, and how the man wrote truer than he ever got to know. Nobody followed me out, no casserole, no tears, no group chat ping. Just quiet. The good kind this time. The kind you choose. I pulled away from the curb with clean hands and a straight spine, and for the first time in 5 years I drove home light. Friday came and went without a buyout, because banks want to see your actual income before they hand you $250,000, and Brooke and Danny's actual income had been me. Facing a courtroom, they consented to the boring ending. The house went on the market that winter. It sold in 5 weeks, close to the appraisal, to a young couple with a swing set in their truck bed the day they came for the walkthrough, which felt right. The loan was paid off, and I finally received back what I'd planted in that house, my down payment, and my share of what it had grown into. I put most of it away for the future, and I opened an education account for Mason with a chunk of it, one that I own and I control, so that my love for that little boy never again has to pass through his parents' hands to reach him. Brooke and Danny moved into a rented duplex across town. It has a small yard. Mason tells me the landlord has a cat. They are fine. Not comfortable at my expense, just fine at their own, which is a sentence 4 years overdue. My mother, at 63, walked into the bank on Main Street and set up her own bill payments for the first time in her life. Aunt Carol went with her the first time, then made her go alone. I hear she tells the church ladies that a mother's sacrifices are never appreciated. I let her keep that. Peace is cheaper than the last word, and I can afford either one now. The only automatic payment I never canceled is the standing order at the florist by the cemetery. Fresh flowers on my father's grave, the first Saturday of every month, from both of us, kiddo. My mother and sister still text sometimes. The messages that ask how I am, I answer. The ones that arrive holding an invoice, I let sit, unread, the way my invitations once did. Some Sundays I have dinner at Aunt Carol's with Meg and Rachel around a table with mismatched chairs, where somebody always saves me the good seat. A table where my name is on the invitation, not the invoice. And every Saturday morning I'm at the community pool, watching a 6-year-old cannonball off the low board and surface yelling, "Aunt Iris, did you see?" I see, buddy. The swim lessons are paid through summer, under a contract with one name on it. Mine. Here's what I know now. My father was right.